The worst feeling for a woman isn't the silence after a fight, or the loneliness in an empty room. It's the moment she finds the courage to speak her truth, to open up about something that's been weighing on her soul day after day, and instead of being met with care, she's met with anger, deflection, and denial. It's the moment she decides to say something not because she wants to argue, not because she wants to start drama, but because the pain inside her has reached a boiling point and she can't carry it alone anymore. She brings it up hoping he'll meet her halfway, hoping he'll say, "Tell me what's going on. I want to understand." But instead he shuts down, or worse, he attacks her, turning her vulnerability into a weapon used against her. He makes her feel like she's crazy, like she's ungrateful, like she's overreacting. Suddenly the conversation isn't about her pain anymore. It's about his ego, his defensiveness, his need to avoid accountability. And she sits there, heart pounding in her chest, wondering how something that mattered so much to her could be brushed off so easily. She wonders why loving him requires so much silence from her, so much shrinking, so much self-editing, and little by little, she stops bringing things up. Not because the hurt disappeared, but because it no longer feels safe to share. It's not that she doesn't want to communicate. She's exhausted from trying. She's tired of being made to feel like the problem, when all she's ever asked for was a little more care, a little more understanding, a little more presence. And in that moment, something breaks inside her, not with a loud crack, but with a quiet ache that says, "This doesn't feel like love anymore. This feels like survival." She didn't want a war. She wanted to be heard. She didn't want to change him. She wanted to be valued. And now, sitting in that space between love and loneliness, she begins to realize that maybe she deserves more than just being tolerated. Maybe she deserves to be chosen, completely, intentionally, and without condition. Not just when things are easy, but especially when they're hard. There's a silence women carry that no one sees. It's not the kind of silence that screams or demands attention. It's the kind that lingers in the air, slowly suffocating her spirit. It's the silence of a woman who's learned that speaking up won't change anything, that explaining how she feels only leads to more blame, more accusations, more confusion. She used to explain herself, over and over again. She would rehearse the words in her head, searching for a gentler way to say it, a softer tone, a calmer approach, anything to avoid the explosion that would follow. She'd wait for the perfect time, the right mood, that delicate window when maybe, just maybe, he'd actually listen. But no matter how carefully she chose her words, it always ended the same. He'd say she was being dramatic, or negative, or too sensitive. Sometimes he'd even twist her words into something they were never meant to be. And so, with time, she began to question herself. She wondered if maybe she was overreacting, if maybe her pain wasn't valid, if maybe love really does mean swallowing your feelings to keep the peace. But deep down, something in her knew this wasn't peace. It was suppression, and it was costing her pieces of herself every single day. The woman who once lit up rooms with her laughter now hesitated before she spoke. The one who used to pour her heart into every conversation now measured her words carefully, afraid they'd be used against her. Her silence wasn't apathy, it was exhaustion, it was heartbreak. It was the quiet voice inside her screaming, "You don't see me anymore. You don't care enough to meet me where I am." And when a woman starts to feel that, when she feels like her emotions are too much, like her honesty is a burden, something inside her begins to shut down. She may stay physically, but emotionally, she begins to disappear. Not because she wants to leave, but because it hurts too much to stay unseen. She's tired of explaining why she deserves the bare minimum, tired of begging for empathy, tired of loving someone who won't stretch even slightly to understand her pain. And in that stillness, something powerful is born. Not resentment, not revenge, but clarity. The kind of clarity that whispers, "I can't do this to myself anymore. I deserve more than being silenced in love." In the quiet aftermath of all the conversations she never got to finish, she sits alone with herself, her thoughts louder than ever, her chest heavy with the weight of words that never made it out. And it's in this silence that a woman begins to hear the truth, not his truth. 'Cause, for so long, she tried to understand him, to walk in his shoes, to see the world through his wounds. She gave him grace, compassion, forgiveness, again and again. because that's how she loves deeply, fully, unconditionally. But no one ever stopped to ask, who's understanding her? Who's pouring into her cup the way she poured into his? She remembers the nights she cried quietly in bed, so she wouldn't wake him. The mornings she smiled through pain, so he wouldn't feel guilty. The times she put her needs on hold just to protect his pride. And now, sitting in the ruins of all the effort she gave, she begins to realize something devastating. She was never asking for too much. She was just asking the wrong person. She wasn't dramatic. She was deprived. She was navigating emotional neglect. And as she reconnects with her own voice, a new kind of grief emerges, not just for what happened, but for everything she accepted in the name of love. She grieves the woman who stayed quiet to keep someone else comfortable, the one who watered dead plants hoping they'd bloom, the one who made excuses for someone who never tried to change. And through that grief, something else begins to take shape: self-respect. A slow, gentle rise in her spirit that says, I may have tolerated this once, but I won't anymore. And it's not a dramatic decision. It's not an angry exit. It's a soft but powerful reclaiming of her energy. She begins to protect her peace the way she once protected his comfort. She sets boundaries, not to punish, but to preserve her soul. And maybe he'll notice the change. Maybe he'll try to pull her back in. But this time, the silence isn't sadness. It's strength. It's the sound of a woman finally choosing herself, not because she stopped loving him, but because she finally remembered how to love herself. There comes a moment, quiet and almost unnoticeable, when a woman finally sees the truth of what she's been living through. It's not always dramatic. It doesn't need yelling or slamming doors. Sometimes it's just a quiet breakfast, where he doesn't ask how she slept, or an evening spent side by side in silence, where she's aching inside but he never even looks up. It's in those ordinary moments that the extraordinary realization hits: she has been alone in this relationship for a very long time. And once that truth settles in her chest, everything starts to look different. She starts replaying memories, not with the blind love she once had, but with clarity. She sees the small dismissals, the way her emotions were minimized, the times he made her feel guilty for needing basic emotional connection. She remembers how often she apologized for how she felt, just to avoid a fight. She recalls how often she smiled through the ache, not because she was okay, but because she was trying to keep him from pulling away. And it's in those reflections that she realizes she was starving for emotional intimacy while sitting next to someone who claimed to love her. That kind of hunger changes a woman. It doesn't just break her heart, it erodes her confidence, her light, her sense of safety, because there is nothing more confusing than being loved in a way that makes you feel unlovable. But now she's no longer begging for scraps. Now she's looking at herself, really looking, and seeing the beauty, the depth, the effort she brought to the table. She sees how she fought for the relationship, how she communicated, how she tried again and again to connect. And she realizes something painful, but freeing: it wasn't her job to carry the whole relationship on her shoulders. It wasn't her responsibility to fix what he refused to acknowledge. She was loving him with everything she had, but love requires reciprocity. And once that understanding settles into her bones, the fog begins to lift. She stops internalizing his inability to show up. She stops taking blame for his coldness. Instead, she begins to grieve the time she lost trying to make one-sided love work. She grieves it, honors it, and then she lets it go, because she finally knows she deserves more than just being tolerated. She deserves to be seen, heard, valued, consistently. And that kind of knowing, that's the beginning of her rising. There's a sacred turning point in every woman's story, when pain stops being something that holds her back and starts becoming the very thing that sets her free. It doesn't happen overnight. No, it happens in layers, in long, quiet moments when she's left alone with her thoughts, reflecting on everything she allowed, everything she ignored, and everything she kept hoping would change. She begins to see that she wasn't just loving someone, she was pouring herself into a void, trying to prove her worth to a man who never truly saw her. And with every memory that resurfaces, she begins peeling back the layers of denial, disappointment, and disillusionment. She starts to recognize how many times she silenced her intuition, how many times she told herself, it's not that bad, when deep down she was drowning. And most of all, she begins to see how deeply she was conditioned to stay quiet, to be the understanding one, to be patient, to be low maintenance. But in the name of being easy to love, she abandoned parts of herself, her voice, her boundaries, her needs, and the worst part. He never even noticed the sacrifices. He just kept taking, never once stopping to ask, is this love safe for you? Or am I showing up in a way that makes you feel secure? And so now, she sits with that truth, not to punish herself, but to finally validate the experience she kept dismissing. It wasn't all in her head. It wasn't her being emotional. It was emotional neglect. It was chronic invalidation. It was the kind of slow, invisible damage that chips away at a woman until she no longer recognizes herself. But now, she's waking up. She's no longer asking, why won't he change? She's asking, why did I feel unworthy of something better? And from that question blooms a powerful rebirth. She starts to reclaim every part of herself that she gave away just to be chosen. Her laughter, her boundaries, her standards, her softness, unapologetically. She stops trying to earn love and starts becoming love. She stops shrinking for a man's comfort and begins expanding into her own wholeness. And the woman who once whispered her truth now speaks it clearly, boldly, without fear. Not because she wants to fight, but because she's finally learned that her voice is sacred, her needs are valid, and her love, it's a gift, not a sentence. And from that place of deep knowing, she starts to rise, not for revenge, not for attention, but for herself. Because she finally sees that the most radical thing she can do is love herself the way she begged someone else to. There's something profoundly powerful about a woman who's walked through the fire of emotional abandonment and came out on the other side, not bitter, not broken, but beautifully aware of her worth. She no longer waits for an apology that will never come. She doesn't hold space for empty promises or almost efforts. Instead, she holds space for herself, for her healing, for her voice, for her joy. She understands now that love, real love, doesn't come with confusion. It doesn't ask you to mute your needs. It doesn't punish you for being vulnerable. It holds you. It hears you. It shows up when it matters most. And that kind of love, she's no longer willing to live without it, not from anyone, especially not from someone who expects her loyalty, but offers no accountability, because she knows her silence was never the problem. Her needs weren't too much. Her standards weren't unrealistic. They were just incompatible with someone who was never ready to meet her at her level. So now, she walks differently, not with arrogance, but with alignment. She no longer explains herself to people committed to misunderstanding her. She no longer lowers her voice to be accepted by men who only hear what they want to. Instead, she protects her peace like it's sacred, because it is. She speaks, and if someone can't listen with an open heart, she doesn't plead anymore. She releases, not with resentment, but with reverence, for the lessons, for the growth, for the woman she had to become. Because now she knows the kind of love she was asking for was never too much. It was just too real for someone not ready to give it. And now, instead of trying to convince someone of her worth, she chooses to build a life that reflects it. She pours into herself. She surrounds herself with people who see her clearly, love her loudly, and show up without being asked. And for the first time in a long time, she doesn't feel like she's missing something. She feels full, whole, alive, because the love she was waiting for, she finally gave it to herself. And that is the moment everything changes. Not because someone came to save her, but because she stopped waiting and became her own rescue. That's not the end of her story. It's the beginning of everything she was always meant to become. Once a woman has healed from the pain of being emotionally starved in a relationship, something shifts in her so deeply that she can never go back to who she was before. She stops looking for love in broken places. She stops begging people to treat her right. And most importantly, she no longer allows her heart to be a landing place for someone who hasn't learned how to hold it with care. She's not jaded. She's wise. She's not bitter. She's discerning. And her new standard isn't perfection. It's emotional safety. It's mutual effort. It's clarity over confusion. Because when you've lived through the kind of love that made you question your worth, that kind of chaos never feels like passion again. It feels like a warning. She now recognizes the red flags she once romanticized, the silent treatments, the emotional withdrawals, the empty apologies followed by repeated behavior. She used to see those as bumps in the road. Now she sees them as signs of a detour she never should have taken. She understands now that real love isn't chaotic. It doesn't come with highs that make you dizzy and lows that leave you begging for crumbs of reassurance. Real love is steady. Real love feels like exhale, not anxiety. And so now, she moves through the world with a quiet strength. She's open, but not naive. She's kind, but not available to everyone. She knows her worth is not a prize to be won, but a light that can only be matched by someone equally luminous. And if that person never shows up, she's still whole, because she's no longer waiting to be chosen. She's choosing herself every single day. Her peace has become her priority, her softness, her strength, her solitude, her sanctuary. She no longer measures love by how much she can give, but by how balanced the giving and receiving is. And when someone steps into her life now, they don't meet the version of her that's trying to prove she's worthy. They meet the woman who knows she already is. That's the difference. That's the evolution. And once a woman has reached that place, there's no turning back. She'll never shrink to fit someone's comfort again. She'll never silence her truth just to keep someone's presence. She's walked through fire, and on the other side, she found herself, and that version of her is sacred, untouchable, unstoppable. A woman who has risen from emotional neglect doesn't just change how she loves, she changes how she lives. She no longer confuses connection with chemistry, or attention with intention. She has learned the hard way that not everyone who comes close deserves a seat at her table, especially if they bring chaos with their charm. She used to fall for potential, now she watches patterns. She used to believe that effort in love meant giving endlessly. Now she understands that effort also means walking away from what drains her. Her heart is still open, but it no longer bleeds for people who only take. Her love is still fierce, but now it's guarded, not by walls of fear, but by gates of wisdom. She listens to her intuition with respect now, not doubt. The first time someone makes her feel small, unheard, or confused, she no longer justifies it. She observes it, she registers it, and she acts accordingly, not out of spite, but out of deep self-protection. Because she knows what it cost her the last time she ignored the signs. She knows what it feels like to give someone multiple chances, only to lose herself a little more each time. She refuses to go back to that version of her. That woman who tried to love harder instead of walking away sooner. That woman who thought she could heal someone through self-sacrifice. No more. Now she understands that love is not supposed to hurt. Growth might be uncomfortable, but love itself. Love should be a balm, not a bruise. And so she moves with intention. She doesn't entertain words without actions. She doesn't chase closure, because she's learned that peace doesn't come from someone else's apology. It comes from her own decision to stop allowing emotional chaos into her life. She's not interested in convincing someone to be ready for her. If they can't show up, she doesn't wait. If they can't communicate, she doesn't decode. If they can't love her with consistency, she doesn't confuse that with mystery. She loves with clarity, and she requires it in return. That's not being difficult. That's being emotionally mature. And the woman she's become, she doesn't settle anymore. Not because she thinks she's better than anyone, but because she finally knows her value. She's not afraid to be alone. She's afraid of losing herself again. And that awareness keeps her rooted, calm, and unshakably clear about one truth. Peace is not negotiable. And if love costs her that, it's not love. It's a lesson she's already learned. When a woman finally steps into the power of her own independence, it's not about being alone. It's about being whole. She's not lonely. She's fulfilled. She no longer looks to another person to complete her, because she realizes that she was always whole. She used to think that love was the missing piece, the thing that would make her feel seen, validated, and worthy. But now she knows that her worth was never dependent on someone else's love. It was within her all along. This shift in mindset doesn't just change how she views relationships. It changes how she views herself. No longer does she beg for validation. No longer does she look for approval in someone else's eyes. Instead, she begins to trust herself, her decisions, her instincts, her emotions, and this trust, this deep-rooted self-belief, becomes the foundation for everything she builds moving forward. She embraces her solitude, not as a punishment, but as a sanctuary. It's where she reconnects with her own heart, where she recharges, and where she reminds herself of how strong she truly is. Being alone doesn't scare her anymore. It's in the solitude that she finds peace, creativity, and clarity. And in that space, she discovers a new kind of freedom, the freedom to live her life on her own terms, without the need for external validation or approval. Her happiness is no longer someone else's responsibility. It's hers to create, to nurture, and to protect. She knows that she's worthy of love, but she also knows that the love she gives to herself is the strongest, most consistent love she'll ever receive. And because she loves herself in this way, she no longer tolerates relationships that drain her or make her question her value. She stops entertaining conversations that leave her emotionally exhausted and begins to surround herself with people who lift her up, who encourage her growth, and who respect her space. She understands now that love is not about losing yourself in someone else. It's about being two whole people coming together, supporting each other's individual growth, while building a life together. And if someone can't meet her at that level, she doesn't hesitate to walk away. She doesn't settle. She doesn't shrink. She doesn't apologize for choosing herself. And in that choice, day after day, moment by moment, she redefines what it means to love and be loved. No longer does she give herself away to anyone who isn't willing to honor the woman she's become. She stays true to herself, and in doing so, she attracts the kind of love that mirrors her strength, her peace, and her worth. There's a kind of power that emerges in a woman who has seen the depths of emotional pain and risen from it, not as a victim, but as a conqueror. It's a quiet kind of strength, one that doesn't boast, doesn't shout, but simply is. This woman knows what it means to be torn apart and put back together, but she also knows that the process of rebuilding was never about returning to who she was. It was about transforming into who she was always meant to be. She doesn't walk into relationships anymore looking for someone to fill the void. She walks into them already whole. She no longer seeks completion. She seeks companionship. She's not looking for someone to save her. She's looking for someone who sees her, who appreciates the fullness of who she is, and who is ready to walk beside her as an equal. And the best part, she knows exactly what she will and won't tolerate. She doesn't need to settle for a love that leaves her feeling empty or unseen. She's learned that love isn't about compromises that make her feel like she has to lose herself. It's about finding someone who complements her, who elevates her, who sees her as a partner in every sense of the word. And so she stops giving space to anyone who is unwilling or unable to offer that same level of respect, commitment, and effort. No longer does she entertain the games, the mixed signals, or the half-hearted promises. She recognizes them for what they are, distractions from her true worth. And she's not here for distractions. She's here for depth, for connection, for a love that is as serious as it is beautiful. When she looks at someone now, she no longer sees their potential. She sees who they are in the present moment. She's learned that growth is a process, but it's a process that requires action, not just words. And if someone can't meet her where she's at, she doesn't hesitate. She doesn't waste time hoping things will change. She walks away, not with bitterness, but with gratitude for the lessons, for the strength she's gained, and for the peace that comes from choosing herself. The woman she's become doesn't chase love, she attracts it, and the love she attracts, it's the kind that mirrors her own strength, the kind that understands her worth, the kind that is as ready to give as it is to receive. She doesn't have to fight for it, argue for it, or beg for it, because the love she deserves is the love that flows naturally, effortlessly, and freely, because she's finally learned how to let it in. And in doing so, she creates a life that reflects the love she's found within herself. When a woman chooses herself truly and unapologetically, she taps into a level of peace that cannot be disturbed. It's the kind of peace that isn't dependent on anyone else's actions, words, or opinions. It's the quiet assurance that comes from knowing who she is and what she deserves. It's the steady belief that no matter what the world throws at her, she will always be okay, because she has learned how to be her own source of strength. This peace doesn't come from avoiding conflict or shutting herself off from the world. It comes from knowing that, no matter what happens, she will handle it. She's faced heartbreak, she's faced disappointment, and she's learned that those moments don't define her. They shape her, yes, but they do not break her. And in this new state of peace, she no longer has to prove anything to anyone. She doesn't need to explain her choices or justify her boundaries. The woman who once tried to explain away her pain now simply walks in her truth, her head held high, her heart at ease. She knows what she's been through, and she knows what she's capable of. The need to seek validation or approval fades away. She no longer feels the need to chase anyone, to convince anyone of her worth, or to play games to get attention. She's no longer interested in people who can't see her value, because she sees it now. She sees how strong, resilient, and beautiful she is, and she knows that any love that comes into her life must match that energy. She doesn't seek perfection, but she seeks consistency. She doesn't demand a flawless partner, but she demands someone who shows up, who respects her, and who is willing to put in the effort. And if someone isn't ready for that, she doesn't fight to make them change. She walks away with love, but with certainty, because she understands that peace is more important than love that comes with chaos. She no longer seeks to fit herself into someone else's world. She creates her own world, one that is filled with joy, freedom, and authenticity. She embraces the quiet moments as much as the loud ones, because she knows that peace isn't something you have to chase, it's something you cultivate from within. And in cultivating that peace, she begins to radiate a kind of calm energy that others are drawn to. It's not something she tries to do, it's simply who she has become. She has made peace with her past, embraced her present, and is ready to step into a future that honors the woman she's become. She no longer apologizes for her needs, her standards, or her space. She holds herself with a quiet confidence, knowing that she is deserving of everything she desires, and because of that, she will never settle again. A woman who has learned to love herself doesn't just change the way she interacts with others, she changes the way she interacts with the world. She steps into every room with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing her worth. She no longer seeks approval from people who aren't aligned with her truth. Instead, she moves with grace and purpose, trusting that those who are meant to be in her life will meet her at her level, and those who can't will fall away. This shift isn't just a change in mindset, it's a complete transformation of her energy. She no longer feels the need to prove herself. She doesn't need to explain why she deserves love, respect, and loyalty. She knows that her presence alone is enough. She radiates self-assurance, not because she's perfect, but because she's accepted her imperfections and learned to love them. She understands that her flaws are not something to hide, but something to embrace. They are part of what makes her uniquely beautiful, and in accepting all parts of herself, she begins to attract the kind of love that mirrors her growth. No longer does she settle for half-hearted gestures or uncertain commitments. She understands that love doesn't require her to shrink herself to fit someone else's expectations. Instead, love is about two people growing together, each offering their own unique strength to the relationship. When she enters a relationship now, it's not out of loneliness or need, it's because she has so much love to give, and she wants to share it with someone who can give it back in equal measure. But if someone doesn't show up with the same level of respect, effort, and understanding, she doesn't beg, she doesn't plead, she simply walks away, knowing that she will be okay, that she will thrive, and that she doesn't need anyone to complete her. She has become complete in herself. This doesn't mean she's closed off to love. On the contrary, it means she's open to it in the healthiest, most balanced way possible. She welcomes love that enhances her life, that supports her dreams, and that values her as an equal. She no longer tolerates love that diminishes her, makes her doubt herself, or pulls her away from the woman she's become. She is worthy of a love that lifts her up, not a love that weighs her down. And when she finds it, she will embrace it fully, without fear, because she knows that she can give and receive love in a way that is powerful, peaceful, and whole. This is the true essence of self-love, not just the ability to love oneself, but the courage to walk away from anything that doesn't reflect that love. And once a woman reaches this level of self-respect, there's nothing she can't achieve, because the love she has for herself becomes the foundation of everything she does, and it will never waver, no matter what life throws her way.